The dawn was gray and heavy with mist over the European countryside. Fields lay stripped and torn by artillery fire, hedgerows shredded, trees scarred and splintered. The air smelled of smoke, mud, and gunpowder, thick with the residue of a war that had scarred every village, every road, every farmhouse. Among the ruins, a young American woman moved with quiet determination. She had trained in the U.S., far from the battlefields of Europe, learning to handle a rifle, to navigate rough terrain, to move swiftly, and to think clearly under fire. Yet nothing could fully prepare her for the reality she faced now. A heavily fortified Nazi position, manned by 200 seasoned soldiers, nestled atop a rise that overlooked the winding river below. She paused for a moment, scanning the position through the morning haze. The enemy had dug in deep, sandbags piled, machine guns pointed, and the unmistakable pattern of riflemen visible along the walls. Scouts had reported the numbers accurately: 200 men, armed and ready, and the rest of her unit had been pinned down days before during an initial assault. Everyone else was out of the picture. It had become clear that the mission now fell to her alone. She adjusted the strap of her rifle and tested its weight in her hands. Every breath counted. Every step had to be calculated. She began her approach along a narrow path, moving through shell-cratered ground, using debris and broken walls as cover. The Germans were vigilant, their voices carried faintly on the wind, their rifles flashing occasionally. She kept low, her movements deliberate, silent. Each heartbeat seemed to echo in her ears, a metronome of tension and resolve. She knew one misstep could cost her life, but hesitation was a luxury she could not afford. Hours passed as she crept closer, nodding the routines of the enemy soldiers. Guards rotated predictably, their laughter masking the tension that war always carries. She watched them, memorizing every pattern. With each observation, she began to formulate a plan, a sequence of actions that required precision, nerve, and sheer focus. Her knowledge of terrain, combined with her training, became her greatest ally. She realized that striking at the right moment, exploiting the smallest vulnerabilities, would give her the edge needed to succeed against overwhelming odds. The sun climbed higher, revealing the scars of conflict etched into the landscape. She paused behind a ruined wall, wiping sweat and grime from her brow, and listened. A sudden shout from the enemy drew her attention, a single soldier moving out of position. She waited, controlled her breath, and when the opportunity arrived, she fired. The shot was precise, quiet enough to avoid drawing immediate attention. The soldier went down, and she moved again, closer now to the heart of the Nazi stronghold. Every action was measured, deliberate. There was no room for error. By midday, she had infiltrated the perimeter, using tunnels of debris, shadows, and misdirection. The soldiers within the compound were unaware of her presence, their attention focused elsewhere, confident in their numbers and the strength of their defenses. She exploited that confidence, slipping through open gates, ducking behind overturned vehicles, and crawling under makeshift barricades. The ground was unforgiving, littered with rubble and the remnants of war, yet she moved swiftly, purposefully, driven by a resolve that would not allow failure. Inside the compound, the atmosphere shifted. The sounds of routine, footsteps, chatter, the clatter of equipment were suddenly broken by an unfamiliar presence. She moved from cover to cover, taking down isolated guards silently, one by one. Her focus was absolute, every movement honed by instinct and training. The first few engagements were over almost before the soldiers realized what was happening. Panic began to ripple through the compound, confusion mounting with each precise strike she executed. Her strategy was working, but there was no room for complacency. Hours merged into an intense continuum of action. Each confrontation required speed, accuracy, and mental clarity. She relied on observation, patience, and the intimate knowledge of her rifle to overcome numerical superiority. The soldiers, caught between disbelief and fear, struggled to regroup, yet her presence was unseen until the moment of decisive action. Every shot counted. Every decision carried weight. Survival and victory were inseparable at this point, two sides of the same coin. By late afternoon, the compound had begun to fall apart from within. Soldiers had been eliminated or driven into panic, command disrupted, communication fractured. She moved with the momentum of a force greater than herself, exploiting openings and weaknesses. Exhaustion was an undercurrent, but adrenaline, focus, and the instinct to survive propelled her forward. Each step brought her closer to the heart of the Nazi stronghold, to the officers and positions that coordinated the defense. The fight was not yet over, but the tide was unmistakably turning. Nightfall approached, and the compound was in disarray. Fires from abandoned equipment cast long shadows, and smoke hung thick over the battleground. She took stock of her surroundings, observing the last remaining pockets of resistance. Her mission was far from complete, yet the numerical advantage she had faced hours before had been neutralized through careful planning, skill, and courage. She paused briefly, catching her breath, listening to the subdued murmur of enemy soldiers, and prepared for the final moves that would secure the stronghold. The night air was heavy with the smell of gunpowder, smoke, and earth churned by artillery. She moved through the darkened compound like a shadow, her boots silent on the rubble-strewn ground. The fires from the previous skirmishes cast a flickering light, illuminating jagged walls, overturned vehicles, and scattered equipment. Every corner, every doorway, every pile of debris held danger, yet she advanced with unwavering precision. She knew the enemy's numbers had dwindled, but even a small group of armed men could be lethal if underestimated. Patience, observation, and calculated action were her only allies. She pressed herself against a shattered wall, listening. Voices carried faintly through the smoke. The officers, previously confident, were now issuing hurried orders, their composure cracked. From this, she gleaned their locations and estimated how many remained. Her mind catalogued every detail, every shadow, every subtle movement. Then she advanced, moving low, her rifle ready, eyes scanning, ears alert. A sudden noise, a footstep on loose rubble, made her pause. She held her breath, waited, and the soldier passed, unaware of her presence. The tiniest misstep could undo hours of careful planning. She had no margin for error. The first clear engagement came suddenly. A group of 4 soldiers had gathered near a command post, trying to coordinate defense. She fired quickly, decisively, taking down 2 with silent precision before the others could react. Panic erupted. She used the chaos, darting from cover to cover, striking isolated soldiers with efficiency. Her training in marksmanship and small unit tactics allowed her to anticipate movements, predict actions, and act before the enemy could respond. The stronghold, once bristling with confidence and control, now teetered under the pressure of one relentless soldier. Hours passed in an almost surreal blur of movement, observation, and engagement. She knew the strongest point was still ahead, the central command bunker where senior officers directed operations. It was heavily guarded, and yet the preceding hours had softened the defenses. Soldiers were scattered, communication broken, morale shattered. She approached with deliberate caution, studying the patterns, identifying the few remaining sentries, and planning her entry. Every step was measured. She could hear her own heartbeat, steady, controlled, in sync with the rhythm of the operation she had meticulously crafted. Reaching the bunker, she found a way in through a partially collapsed wall. Inside, the officers were scrambling, attempting to rally the remaining men. She struck swiftly, eliminating 2 guards silently before the others could react. The officers realized too late that they were under direct threat. One attempted to raise an alarm, another reached for his weapon. But her aim was true, and within moments the command structure was in disarray. She had neutralized the nerve center of the stronghold. Each decision, each action, had been informed by careful observation, patience, and a refusal to fail. The chaos she had wrought was now almost total. Outside the bunker, the surviving soldiers were confused, scattered, and fearful. Without orders, without coordination, they became increasingly vulnerable. She moved among them with purpose, picking off isolated soldiers, using debris and shadows to mask her movements. The advantage of stealth, speed, and precision became overwhelming. One by one, the remaining troops fell into disarray, retreat, or surrender. Exhaustion tugged at her limbs, but she pressed on. Momentum was her ally, and hesitation was a luxury she could not afford. By the early hours of the morning, the stronghold was nearly silent. Fires smoldered, smoke thickened the air, and the few surviving soldiers were trapped, confused, and demoralized. She moved through the compound, checking corners, ensuring no hidden threats remained. Her methodical sweep left no room for surprises. Every tactic, every maneuver, every shot had been deliberate, calculated, informed by training, experience, and the instinct for survival. The numerical disadvantage she faced at the outset had been erased through precision, focus, and courage. The aftermath of the night's operation was stark. Bodies lay where they had fallen, scattered equipment marked the chaos of the engagement, and the compound, once a symbol of Nazi strength, was now subdued, broken, and under her control. She paused for a moment, surveying the scene, breathing deeply, listening to the silence that followed the storm. There was no triumph in her chest, only the calm recognition that the mission was complete. The cost of war, the reality of violence, was etched into every wall, every piece of rubble, every shadowed corner she had traversed. Yet in this quiet, there was a sense of accomplishment born of skill, courage, and determination. Dawn crept over the horizon, pale light illuminating the devastation she had traversed. She moved among the survivors, disarming them, securing the perimeter, and documenting positions. Communication lines were severed, morale shattered, and command eliminated. What had begun as a near-impossible mission had ended in a complete victory, achieved by one soldier against overwhelming odds. She reflected on the moments of doubt, the careful calculations, the precise actions, and the clarity of mind that had brought her through. History would remember the event as remarkable, but in that quiet morning she felt only the weight of reality, the stark, unembellished consequences of a solitary soldier's resolve. As the sun climbed higher, she prepared to consolidate her position, gather intelligence, and await reinforcements. The landscape was scarred, the stronghold dismantled, and the enemy subdued. Yet she remained vigilant, aware that war offered no guarantees and that each moment could demand the utmost of skill and courage. The hours of careful planning, observation, and action had been validated by results, and the mission's success rested solely on her determination, focus, and capability. She had faced impossible odds and emerged intact, a solitary figure in a broken landscape, resolute, prepared, and aware of the magnitude of what had been accomplished. Morning light filtered through the broken walls and smoke-stained windows, revealing the full scope of the stronghold she had conquered. The compound was silent but tense, a fragile calm after the storm. Bodies of fallen soldiers lay where they had fallen, scattered among shattered equipment and ruined buildings. The surviving enemy troops, those who had not fallen in the night, were subdued, wary, and closely monitored. Every step she took was deliberate, every motion calculated. Her mission now extended beyond simply surviving. It was about consolidating control, securing intelligence, and ensuring that no remnants of the enemy could regroup and mount a counterattack. She moved quickly among the prisoners, disarming them and organizing them into manageable groups. Each man's expression told the same story: shock, disbelief, and a dawning recognition of what had transpired. Her authority was clear, conveyed not through words but through the precision, confidence, and composure she carried with her. She maintained constant vigilance, aware that any lapse could be exploited. Even in this moment of relative calm, the potential for danger was ever present. Her mind cataloged each prisoner's position, every weak point in the compound, every opportunity to strengthen her hold. She inspected the communications center first, a small room lined with radios, wires, and charts detailing troop movements. Much of it had been damaged in the earlier assault, but enough remained to provide critical intelligence. She took meticulous notes, recording the locations of other enemy positions, patrol routes, and logistical supply chains. This information, if transmitted back to her command, could turn the tide in the larger battle. Every detail mattered, every observation was a potential advantage. She moved with deliberate care, ensuring nothing was overlooked, nothing wasted. Next, she secured the armory. Weapons, ammunition, grenades, and other supplies were inventoried and organized. She evaluated what could be used immediately, what had to be stored safely, and what might be destroyed to prevent recapture. Her training in logistics and combat efficiency guided her hands, ensuring that the resources at her disposal were maximized. The survivors of the enemy force watched silently, aware that their fate rested entirely in her hands. Discipline, control, and foresight became tools as important as marksmanship or stealth. By mid-morning, she had established a functional command post within the compound. She set up sentries at key points, creating layers of observation and defense. Any attempt by the remaining enemy soldiers to regroup or escape would be immediately detected. She moved among the prisoners, speaking minimally but authoritatively, directing their placement, ensuring order, and maintaining security. It was exhausting work, yet she remained calm, deliberate, and precise. The compound, once a hub of enemy operations, was now effectively under her sole management. As the day progressed, she conducted careful reconnaissance of the surrounding terrain. High ground, wooded areas, and nearby roads were surveyed for signs of incoming reinforcements or escape routes for enemy troops. She mapped the terrain mentally, noting advantageous positions for defense, areas for ambush, and natural barriers that could be exploited. Her solitary vigilance ensured that the enemy would have no opportunity to regain control, and that the stronghold could serve as a forward position for Allied forces. Every observation, every calculation, every movement reinforced her control over the situation. The prisoners, now contained and monitored, became a source of information. She interrogated them systematically, asking clear, precise questions, seeking knowledge of troop movements, supply lines, and any plans for counterattack. Answers came hesitantly, often contradictory, but over time patterns emerged. Each fragment of information was weighed, verified, and stored mentally. The intelligence she gathered would prove invaluable not only for the current mission, but for future operations across the region. She worked tirelessly, aware that the accuracy and efficiency of her efforts could have consequences far beyond the immediate stronghold. Night fell again, but this time it brought a different challenge. The compound was intact, its defenses organized, but she remained alert. She patrolled silently, checking sentries, observing the prisoners, and scanning the horizon for threats. Every shadow, every rustle of movement, every distant sound demanded attention. Exhaustion tugged at her body, yet adrenaline and resolve kept her moving. The night was long and her vigilance uncompromising. The mission had entered a new phase, one of control, protection, and intelligence gathering, and she bore the full weight of responsibility. By the second night, word of the stronghold's fall had begun to ripple outward. Nearby Allied units began moving toward her position, drawn by the success of the operation and the opportunity to consolidate the territory. She coordinated with them, sharing intelligence, providing guidance on prisoner management, and ensuring the stronghold was defensible during the transition. Even with reinforcements arriving, she remained the central figure, the one whose actions had transformed an impossible mission into a strategic victory. Her leadership was unquestioned, earned not by rank but by skill, courage, and flawless execution under extraordinary pressure. In the quiet moments before dawn, she reflected on the hours that had passed. The sheer scale of what she had accomplished was difficult to fully grasp. 200 enemy troops, eliminated or subdued, the stronghold neutralized, intelligence gathered, and a defensible position established, all by a single soldier. She allowed herself a brief pause, a moment to acknowledge the reality of her achievement, though there was no time for celebration. The war continued, and each victory was both a relief and a reminder of the ongoing struggle. She steeled herself for the coming days, ready to continue, aware that the battlefield demanded constant readiness. Dawn broke over the stronghold for the final time, casting pale light across shattered walls and smoldering debris. The night's darkness had given her cover, but the day demanded vigilance in a different way. Allied forces had begun to arrive, moving cautiously through the terrain she had secured. She guided them silently, showing the safest paths, pointing out strategic positions, and briefing them on the remaining threats. Though reinforcements now walked the grounds, the weight of the operation, its planning, execution, and outcome, rested entirely on her shoulders. Every decision she had made in the past 24 hours had culminated in this moment, yet there was no room for complacency. She conducted one final sweep of the compound, ensuring that no hidden soldiers remained, that prisoners were accounted for, and that all entrances and exits were controlled. Each building was checked systematically, each corner scrutinized. Even in the chaos of battle, her mind remained methodical, focused on eliminating uncertainty. The survivors of the enemy forces, now fully contained, were escorted to secure locations, their movements observed and recorded. The stronghold, once a symbol of enemy power, had been transformed into a controlled, organized position ready for occupation. Communication lines were restored as best as possible under the circumstances. Radios that had been damaged or left unattended were repaired or replaced, and messages were sent to nearby units and command posts. Her reports were precise, factual, and complete, detailing troop positions, captured supplies, and any intelligence gleaned from prisoners. The information would be vital in shaping further operations in the region, and her ability to gather it had been as crucial as her actions in combat. Every step she had taken, every risk she had assumed, had contributed to this strategic advantage. As Allied forces consolidated the position, she surveyed the surrounding terrain one last time. From the vantage point she had established, she could see the ridges, the river, the roads leading to other enemy positions. She marked the best defensive points, noted potential vulnerabilities, and provided guidance on how to use the landscape to their advantage. Her knowledge of the enemy's habits, patrol patterns, and defensive structures, painstakingly acquired over the past 2 days, gave her the clarity to make informed decisions. She moved with the quiet confidence of someone who had navigated impossible odds and emerged victorious. The prisoners, now organized and under supervision, provided further insights. She interrogated them methodically, asking questions that would reveal larger operational plans, troop movements, and hidden supplies. Some answers came easily, others required persistence and patience. She recorded everything mentally, aware that this intelligence could save lives, prevent future engagements, and shift the balance in the ongoing conflict. Her focus never wavered. Even in moments when exhaustion threatened, her sense of duty and clarity of purpose carried her forward. Every detail mattered, every observation could have consequences. As midday approached, she oversaw the final stages of securing the stronghold. Allies arrived to relieve her of direct control, but she continued to guide, instruct, and monitor. Her reputation among the newly arrived units was evident in their respect and attentiveness. Orders were followed without hesitation, and her directions were implemented efficiently. Though the operation had begun as an impossible solo mission, its final success required the integration of forces and coordination she had orchestrated single-handedly. She remained central, the anchor around which the operation had revolved. The sun climbed higher, and with it came a brief moment of calm. She allowed herself to reflect, not on glory or recognition, but on the reality of what had transpired. 200 enemy soldiers neutralized, a fortified stronghold captured, intelligence gathered, and strategic advantage secured, all by a single individual. The weight of the responsibility, the constant awareness of danger, and the precision of her actions were not forgotten. In that quiet moment, she understood the magnitude of her mission, the clarity of her decisions, and the relentless focus that had brought her to this point. Even as she paused, she remained vigilant. War allowed no true respite. Nearby units were mobilizing, supply lines were being established, and the front lines continued to shift. She oversaw the coordination, ensuring that the stronghold could be defended until full occupation was possible. Every detail was attended to: the placement of sentries, the allocation of weapons, the monitoring of prisoners, and the documentation of intelligence. Her discipline and foresight ensured that nothing was left to chance. The mission's success was complete, but its permanence depended on ongoing vigilance and careful planning. As the day drew to a close, she finally allowed herself a moment to stand apart from the immediate chaos. The compound lay secured, the enemy subdued, and Allied forces were in position. She observed the scarred landscape, noting the cost of the operation, the destruction, and the lives affected. Her thoughts were clear and measured, devoid of exaggeration or embellishment. The mission had demanded every ounce of her skill, courage, and resilience. Every decision had carried weight, every action had consequences. She had faced overwhelming odds, navigated extreme danger, and emerged not by chance, but by competence, focus, and determination. In the final hours, she documented the mission in detail, recording observations, lessons learned, and recommendations for future operations. Her notes were precise, factual, and organized, a testament to the thoroughness that had defined every stage of her undertaking. She recognized the broader significance of her actions, not for personal glory, but for the strategic impact on the ongoing war effort. The stronghold, once a symbol of enemy strength, now stood as evidence of what one determined individual could accomplish through skill, courage, and unwavering focus. As night fell for the final time, she took stock of her own condition: exhausted, sore, and worn, yet alert, composed, and ready for the challenges that lay ahead. She understood the enormity of what had been achieved and the consequences it would carry for the larger war. Alone against 200 enemy soldiers, she had succeeded where conventional forces had faltered. Her actions had changed the dynamics of the region, secured vital intelligence, and provided a defensible position for future operations. In that quiet, reflective moment, she acknowledged both the cost and the accomplishment of the mission. The operation concluded not with fanfare but with measured efficiency. Allies continued to arrive, positions were reinforced, prisoners were processed, and intelligence relayed. She remained central until every practical task had been completed, ensuring continuity and stability. Her focus, discipline, and relentless determination had carried her through an extraordinary mission. The reality was stark. A single soldier had altered the course of a battle, secured a strategic position, and done so through courage, skill, and unwavering precision. In the stillness of the night, with the compound secure and the mission complete, she finally allowed herself to rest. The weight of responsibility lifted slightly, but the knowledge of what had been accomplished remained. One soldier alone had faced an entire Nazi squad, dismantled a fortified stronghold, and emerged victorious. The battlefield, scarred and silent, bore witness to the intensity, focus, and resilience required to achieve what so few could imagine. Her story would endure, not as legend or myth, but as a testament to the extraordinary impact of courage, skill, and steadfast determination in the face of impossible odds.